Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. Just launched the kayak. We've got beautiful fishing conditions today, although I do wish we had just a little puff of wind out there. But we've got overcast skies and we have a break from the heat. That's also important. The past, I don't know, it seems like 3 weeks or something, it's been in the 90s. And we finally have a little bit of relief from the heat. It's mid-60s this morning. Feels really nice. For whatever reason, there's not many people out here fishing. So my plan is to paddle across the lake, start fishing, and then work my way back. And if I run into any fish while I'm paddling, I'll just take a little break, rest my arms, get back to it. This part is always easier in fast forward mode. But while I was paddling across the lake, I saw some fish chasing bait. So you know what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull over and see if I can catch them. So those fish were busting herring. And I've got a Megabass Giant Dog X in the bluegill color. I think it's called gill. But when the fish are fired up and chasing, you can throw in a lot of different stuff and they'll hit it. Anyway, I got one to come back for it. It's tough when you're paddling and they randomly pop up in the middle of the lake. Generally, they're not going to pop up anywhere close to you. So by the time you get over to them, there's a good chance they've gone down and they're not going to come back up. And you can hang around and wait for them to come back up, but maybe they don't come back up for a long time. And you're better off just continuing on your merry way. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but if I can run up on them fairly quickly and get a few casts in, I think it's worthwhile. And every once in a while I pull a fish out of the school and give my arms a break, and then it's back to paddling again. Here's a look at that bait. Bluegill pattern. Doesn't look anything like a herring. They still ate it. Alright, back to paddling. There's a little bit of a ripple on the other side of the pond, and that's where I'm headed to. And then if my arms get tired paddling or I see anything fishy, I'm going to stop the kayak, take a few casts, and then continue on. I've mentioned this before, but you can increase the distance you can paddle by changing up your technique. So normally I start out by pulling the paddle towards me and getting into some kind of rhythm. And then I'll go to a punching motion. So left hook, right hook, left hook, right hook, but the same kind of rhythm. And then if I really get tired, I can stop a fish like I'm doing right here. Or I widen out my grip on the paddle. So sort of like if you're doing push-ups and you do push-ups with your hands kind of tight to your chest. And then you spread out and put them out wide, past your shoulders. You're using different muscle groups. And it's the same idea paddling a kayak. You want to tire out different muscle groups and then rotate through them, and then you can start rotating back and you can just keep going. And then if you really get tired, just stop and fish or take a few pictures or whatever, and then back to it. Well, after all that paddling, I finally caught up with the wind. And the wind's a good thing because it generally makes the fish more aggressive than they are in flat, calm water, which is the water behind me. Still fishing the Megabass Giant Dog X. And I had a nice one come up and take a swipe at it. I don't know what happened, if he missed the bait or I was trying to juggle the paddle and I was moving around a little bit. I might have been a little bit out of position, but either way I missed him. But that's okay. I'm going to get into a bunch of fish pretty soon. So I had to put down the Megabass Giant Dog X and pick up a Crush City freeloader on a 1/4 ounce jig head. And that's the chartreuse and white color. I thought chartreuse and white on an overcast day like this, it's really morning still, might do all right. And it didn't take too long before I was into some fish. Unlike before where I was running into fish that were popping bait, these fish weren't showing at all, at least at first. They did a little bit later on. So I'm blind casting that freeloader. I don't have any electronics. I certainly don't have any forward-facing sonar. I'm blind casting the freeloader, letting it hit bottom, and then I'm trying to do a slow shaking retrieve, and the fish seem like they come up behind the bait and just suck it in. I reel down tight and I have them. I've only been playing with this freeloader for a few days, and it's already caught me a bunch of fish, so I'm already a big fan of it. That's not a bad one. Nice and thick. There he is. Yeah. Eating well. Thanks, buddy. This was just a couple casts later. It seemed like I'd have to find a sweet spot, and it could be a spot that just had a school of bait with a school of fish under it, or it could be some offshore structure, but it didn't have to be. It seemed like the more important thing was finding some bait, and then the fish would be near the bait. And keep in mind, I'm bottom strolling. I'm casting out, I'm letting that bait hit the bottom, and then I'm slowly winding the reel while I'm shaking the rod the whole time. It's mostly shaking it with your wrist. I've got a loop knot on the nose of that jig head. It's a Homer Road loop knot, and I feel like that gives it a little bit more action. When you're shaking it, that freeloader with its flat sides, it's doing 180 degrees left to right turn underwater. So that's what that shaking is doing. It's getting that bait to flip-flop from one side to the other. Left, right, and it'll go almost 180 degrees. And I got another one. Not bad, not a bad one. I think the first one was a little bigger. Those loop knots aren't the best knots compared to something like a double line knot, like a polymer or whatever, your favorite double line knot. So I was constantly checking my line and retying. I'm only fishing 6-pound Yozuri hybrid as a leader, which is similar in diameter to 10-pound fluoro, like a higher grade fluoro. But it's still pretty light stuff. Anyway, I felt like if there was any kind of abrasion, I'd retie and then I'd pull out another rod, and that happened to have a different color, which is the albino shad color. And they seem to eat this color pretty well too. My idea was to start out with the chartreuse and white when it was, a little bit earlier and a little bit darker, and then switch to more natural colors as the sky got a little bit brighter. Still pretty overcast, but they seem to eat both colors pretty well for me. The herring that are in here look a lot more like the albino shad color than the chartreuse and white. And I don't know if it's a visibility thing. It's pretty dark down there, I bet, especially on an overcast day. Or maybe just something different that stands out from all the herring that are in here. Whatever the reason, they seem to like the chartreuse and white color, but they also like the albino shad, which is a much more natural color. I like more solid colors without flake on overcast days, and then I'll go to something like a Tennessee shad or something with more flake when the sun's out. Anyway, it seems to be working. I just mean that, in general, that's my color preference for flukes and swim baits. I haven't been fishing the freeloader that many days, so I'm still learning the bait. But I like what I see so far. The other nice thing is that I haven't been cut off by a pickerel yet. I'm sure it'll happen, but for whatever reason, the pickerel are leaving this freeloader alone, which I like, because the pickerel around here can be a menace. Hey, another nice one. Thanks for playing, bud. I think this was my second cast after that last fish. And I tried to hit the same area where I caught the fish the last time. And if that didn't work, I'd start fan casting around. But it's the same kind of procedure. I cast out, let that bait hit the bottom, get it up off the bottom, and then start a slow retrieve while I'm shaking my wrist, getting that bait to flip-flop underwater. I also think the colors with a distinctive two-tone to them will show up better underwater as that bait is flip-flopping left, right, left, right. So I like the idea of contrasting colors from the top of the bait to the belly, rather than like a solid white or I don't know, some like green pumpkin goby that was just one color throughout. I like the idea for this specific bait of having a two-tone color pattern. And I lost that one. He threw the jig head. I'm fishing with a 1/4 ounce jig head, and it's fairly easy for the fish to throw it. Even I'm trying to, keep the rod tight and everything, but it's just I think it's just a physics thing. There's enough weight on the head of that jig head that once they get up out of the water and start thrashing their head, if they get any tiny little bit of slack at all, they can work that jig head free and launch it into outer space. A couple times it's come whizzing past my head. But that's alright. Just cast back out to the same general area and see if I can get another one. Luckily the fish were pretty cooperative. Even though they're not showing, I have a kind of idea in my head of where those fish are, where the school is. So I just cast back to the same spot and keep milking that school for all it's worth. I've been thinking about other places to throw this bait too, and I think it's going to be a good bait for a lot of different lakes and ponds in the New England area. And I don't think they've seen too much of this bait yet. I know down south in some of the tourney lakes, they see a ton of these jig and minnow presentations now. But around me, I don't think they've seen too many of this bait, and they're hitting it like they haven't seen too much of it. But anyway, I was thinking, even lakes without herring in them, if you could throw them like a perch pattern. They have a green pumpkin chartreuse pepper. That last fish coughed up some herring, and I was going to try to grab one and show you guys what it looks like. But it sunk. So I'll get another one a little bit later on and show you what it looks like. Either this video or the next, I can't remember. So by now I'm developing a little bit of a game plan, and that is, if I don't see any fish actively feeding, the clouds and the wind and just the conditions are really helping me today. When it's 90 degrees and bright sun, it's not like this. Anyway, when I don't see any fish actively feeding, I can pick off a few more fish with the jig and minnow. That Crush City freeloader is just crushing it for me. Whereas before, maybe I'd spend a lot of time waiting for active fish to pop up, or maybe pick off a few with a fluke or a topwater, but nothing really consistent. I'd spend a lot of time searching for fish, hunting for fish. With the jig and minnow, or bottom strolling or mid strolling, whatever you want to call it, I'm able to at least contact a few more fish. And I'm still working on the best jig head and rod and line combo, because every once in a while one of them comes up and he's throwing that 1/4 ounce jig head around, and he'll end up throwing that jig head and it goes whizzing by my head. So I'm still losing a few more fish than I'd like to, but I've kind of settled on a 7-foot medium rod for now. I'm thinking a 7'6" medium, or even a medium heavy might keep a few more fish pinned. And I'm fishing pretty light line. It's 10-pound braid with a 6-pound Yozuri hybrid leader. And I might be able to bump that up, especially if I find some bigger fish. Oh, I got the bait. So that fish coughed up one of the herring. I know it's a little small. Let me see if I can zoom in. Please hold. All right, we're zoomed in. You can see the jig head and the freeloader are about the same length as the herring. It's a tall bait fish, silvery. It's got a grayish back. I know most of the scales are rubbed off from the fish eating it, but you can see in the tail section it's got a grayish back, a little bit of a purple hue, and then like a chartreuse-ish olive midsection, and then a silvery belly. So that's what I'm trying to mimic with that freeloader, and I know it's not exact, but the fish are telling me it's pretty close. Anyway, I had a bunch of fish pop up somewhat close to me. I reached behind me and I grabbed my BFS rod with a Super Fluke Junior. Now before I had a bait fish in my hand, I was thinking that these bait fish were a little bit shorter than they actually ended up being. And I think on my next trip I brought a full-size Super Fluke with me. But we don't have too much wind, and a Super Fluke Junior is a good bet when there's not much wind. Anyway, it worked. It's a balancing act. I'm trying to balance the lure presentation with the conditions and the wind and cloud cover, etc. And if I'm lucky enough to have some fish pop up near me, I hit them with that Super Fluke Junior because that's what I brought today. And if I don't have any fish showing, it's back to the Crush City freeloader in either the albino shad or the chartreuse and white that I was fishing earlier. As it got a little bit brighter, I was sticking more with the albino shad, and it seemed to be working. Another thing that I'll say is that when you're fishing like this, these freeloaders, they're just plastisol baits, and they're reasonably durable for a plastisol bait, but it's not like the Z-Man TPE plastic. It's not like an elastomer plastic. So as long as the baits are still fully intact, you know, they can be a little bit shredded, they can be torn in places, I'll save them and glue them together with Mend It, and then put them right back into the clamshell and use them again. Now some of the baits, the fish rip off the tail section or otherwise completely mangle it, so I can't glue it back together. In those cases, I just take them home and dispose of them. But if I can glue them back together at all, that's what I'm doing. And it really saves on the number of baits you have to buy. And it also, you know, some of these colors can be hard to get at certain times of the year. And so if you have a color that you want and it's just not in stock anywhere, it really makes sense to glue them back together with Mend It and then put them back on a jig head the next day. And so far it's working for me. Oh, I missed one there. Let's see if he comes back for it. Just shaking the rod with my wrist. Every once in a while I'll give it a little pop if I feel something on the bottom, if I'm reeling too slowly and I hit some weeds down there, or I don't know what. Anything else that could be down there. I just give my rod a pop it away from whatever's down there, because the jig and the minnow, they don't do well in weeds. Got to keep it out of that junk. Anyway, I finally got coaxed one into eating it. I was more than halfway back to the boat at that point, so there's really nowhere for him to go except underneath the boat or straight up. Oh! And he launched that jig head right by my head. Yeah, like I said, I still have to figure out the best rod and reel and line combo. I'm thinking a little bit longer rod might be the ticket. A lot of people fish these strolling baits with a shorter rod because it's easier to shake. But I'm thinking a longer rod might help keep them pinned a little bit better. Or maybe more of a moderate fast rod and not a super fast rod. That's something I'll play around with. But the important part is being able to catch some fish on this, and I'm slowly figuring out this bait, and I'm gonna keep it in the arsenal because it's working. Started to make my way back towards the ramp, and I ran into some other fish, but they were being a little bit difficult. And in this section here, there's more weeds too, so I have to keep my bait above the weeds if I'm going to contact any fish, so I'm not letting it go all the way to the bottom. I was reeling a little bit faster, but I'm trying to keep the bait above the weeds. And it seemed like I was doing better earlier, reeling slowly when I could, but there's some deeper grass here, and it just will get all over the jig and minnow and wreck the retrieve. So I felt like it was better to try to keep that bait up higher than let it get sucked down into the weeds. Anyway, it worked. I got another fish. It's a fun morning out here, and most of that is due to the weather. Not too much to do with me. You know, the cooler weather, the clouds, a little bit of wind makes all the difference in the world. If it's going to be bright and sunny, it's going to be a tough morning for me. But just a little bit of weather gets these fish all fired up and makes the trip a lot more fun. The star today was definitely the freeloader. I got a few more fish on top water early. I got them on that Giant Dog X in the bluegill color. And I added a couple more on Super Fluke Junior, but that was kind of a deal where they were close to me. I lost another one when he came up and shook his head. That jig went flying by my head again. I'm going to try to get him on the Super Fluke Junior, but I didn't have any luck doing that. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. Just like all my other videos, I'll list all the gear in the video description so you can duplicate what I was doing out here today at your own home lakes. Hopefully have some good success there too. I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!